All right, in the previous lesson, we explored some of the attributes that are available on a series object, and in this lesson, we'll dive into 3 methods that are available on a series object. This is just the beginning of, by the way, we're going to dive into dozens of methods down the road. These are just some of the easiest ones to give you a better sense of the difference between an attribute and a method. So a method, as mentioned in the last lesson, actually does something to the object. That may be manipulating it or adding values to it, removing values, or it may do something like a calculation with the object's values. So let's begin by creating another series, and this one was actually going to be a series of floating point numbers. So let's begin with our list. I'm going to call it prices, and let's give it 3 floating point values: $2.99, $4.45, $1.36. Totally random again. Once again, we have to create a brand new series, so we're going to do pd.series. That's our series method, by the way, and it's a method because it is called on the pandas library and it does something. It creates something. In this case, it creates a series for us, so that's why it's called a method. And as we'll see, there are methods available not just on the pandas library, but on the series that we actually generate through pandas. So let's again give it our prices list. Let's preview it before we assign it to a variable. Looks good to me. We there have our data type listed as a floating point below. We have our values right here and our automatically generated index to the left here. So we're satisfied. Let's assign it to a variable. Let's once again use S because it's super simple, S for series, and let's preview it below by writing S on the last line of the cell. So now we have a new series of floats that's being stored in our variable called S. So once again, if I write S dot and press tab, I'll see a list of all of my available attributes and methods. In the last lesson, we looked at values, index, and dtype. So let's try out 3 quick mathematical methods. There is the sum method, and just as you might predict, it adds up all of the values that exist within our series. So it's really only going to make sense on a series that's full of integers or floating points like we have here. And now methods, unlike attributes, do require parentheses at the end. So just like when we use this series method and we gave it this prices list, this series method requires parentheses because it is a method. So sum is a method that we call on the series, so it does require that set of parentheses, but we don't have to place anything within it at this point. So if I execute this, it's going to add up all of the values within my series. So 2.99, 4.45, and 1.36 together added up is equal to 8.8. And the reason that it's a method is because it performs some kind of calculation. It doesn't just give me the values like the values attribute does. It takes the values and does something with them, some kind of calculation in this case. So that's the difference between an attribute and a method. And let's just take a look at 2 other methods so we can practice with the syntax. We have the product method. So once again, let's write S for our series variable, dot to indicate we want to do something with it. Let's start with tab completion, start typing prod. There's product, which is what we want. Press enter to select it. Place the parentheses at the end. It is a method, it's required. And the product method predictably multiplies all the values against each other. So 2.99 times 4.45 times 1.36 gives you this result, 18.09. And finally, the last method that I want to dive into, just again to give you a sense of what a method is the mean method. Mean, if you can recall from 4th grade math, is the mathematical term for average. So this is going to add up all the values in our series and then divide them by the total number of values, which is 3. So the average of the values in the series is 2.93. So again, this mean is a method because it's not just giving us the values or the index, it's actually performing some kind of operation. It has to do additional computation in order to give us this final result. So that's the difference between these 3 methods, sum, product, and mean, and the things we explored in the previous lesson, which were attributes. Methods perform some kind of operation. Methods do something. Attributes do not. And in the next lesson, we'll start diving into the available ways that we can modify how a method works. And we're actually going to explore it with our series constructor method in our pandas library.